Welcome back, builders. I got a treat for everyone this time around. So, we've done giants, we've done humans, we have not done underwater yet. And I want to change that. There are several underwater nations in the early age. They can be a little tricky if you haven't played any underwater. I think Atlantis stands out as perhaps being I don't know if they're the strongest, they are strong, but probably the easiest to get started playing underwater. And the reason for that is everything on your roster is amphibious. Overall, I would say we have a pretty good roster on Atlantis, but there's some things that hold them back, and we'll talk about that as we go on. First, let's take a quick read of their lore and see what they're all about. So, this is Atlantis, emergence of the deep ones. For centuries, the seas have been the dominion of the Tritons, but recently a nation of beings resembling a cross between a fish, frog, and human has emerged from the deepest gorges of the oceans. The race is not entirely unknown, for there are a few of them who have made shallow coastal reefs their home. But the Triton kings never imagined they were numerous or powerful enough to form a nation. These Atlanteans of the depths never stop growing and will live for several hundreds of years unless killed. The Atlantean society is organized in a strict hierarchy of size and age. The oldest and most cunning Atlanteans have made themselves kings and queens of the Basalt City in the deepest reaches of the ocean. The Atlanteans of the deeps use weapons of enchanted basalt made by basalt kings. So these guys are pretty cool. They're like antediluvian horrors, minus like the Cthulhu cosmic aspect. That's more of like Riley's thing. These guys are more like the deep, dark sea and what could be down there that we just haven't discovered, or is just waiting to crawl up during a storm and drag people under the ocean. As national features, they are all amphibious, like we were talking about earlier, and they are true amphibians. So they fight just as well on land as they do underwater. And that's important because poor amphibians really struggle fighting amphibious or aquatic troops. So you're not going to have a penalty wherever you're having to fight. For our military, we have quite a spectrum down here, and a lot of them are guy with spear, very similar units, but there's still some distinct categories of units that we'll look at here. Generally speaking, we have light infantry, we have some very heavy infantry, and we have a little smattering of kind of in between. We have no range weapons. Generally speaking, you don't see any range underwater. There's a couple exceptions. So anytime you are able to use range underwater, it's pretty notable. Atlanteans do not enjoy that benefit. For magic, we have earth, water, fire, and a tiny bit of astral. And the earth and water especially, we have very strong pathing. Fire, we have decent, I would say, and astral, like I said, is a very tiny amount of astral. Definitely not an astral powerhouse. Our priests are powerful. We actually have a recruitable Holy 3. We have a recruitable, recruitable Holy 2. And we have a recruitable Holy 1. So we have the whole spectrum here. Each one of them has various uses we'll look at when we get down to units, but overall we have very good priest access. For buildings, we have advanced forts. So that actually means that we can build castles. That is one higher than everyone else in the age generally has access to. So that contributes to us being pretty good on economy. Let's start out by looking at units first. So first up we have our Atlantean spearmen and our reef dwellers. So Atlantean spearmen are the basic unit of an Atlantean. This is kind of the equivalent of like a militia. Maybe they're a tad bit better than most militia in some ways and a tad bit worse. They only have stone spears, so not particularly good. They're only wearing sharkskin armor, so again, not particularly good. We also have a reef dweller. This is of note because on land, we don't have access to our units, even if we build forts. If it's a coastal fort, we can recruit these reef dwellers, but we will not get any of our other units or commanders. So this is the thing that really holds Atlantis back, in that we have good units, we have good mages and leaders, but the amount of forts we can build underwater limits our growth potential. Once we need to make landfall, and you probably will because you're going to need to take thrones to win the game, this is the unit that you can get other than the indies that are already there. Luckily, this guy is at least okay. So 10 gold, 10 resources, 9 recruitment points. So very, very cheap. He has 10 protection, 11 strength, 10 attack, 11 defense. So okay, pretty bog standard. He uses a coral spear, which is nice. It has a weak poison on it, so that's something. It's length 3. They have dark vision, which is useful. They're also amphibian, like everything else on the roster. And we have these poison barbs, which if you have a length 1 weapon or shorter and you attack them, you can get poisoned. That can be pretty notable for cavalry with hoof attacks, since hooves are 0 length weapons, and anyone else who's just using short things. It can be noticeable when it comes up. It's not usually going to change the tide of battle, though. They have a shield, they have some body armor, no helmets. I guess we're just keeping the trend going of playing things that don't wear helmets. Next up, we have the, I guess, smaller deep ones. So we have just the generic deep one, and then we have generic deep one plus a spear. They're notable for having 2 attacks on either unit. The first guy just has a claw and a bite, the other has a spear and a bite. 10 gold, 1 resource, 9 recruitment. So pretty dang cheap. And what do you get for that? A little more than human HP, better strength, average attack, lower defense, low protection. But these are dirt cheap things. They're size 3, and they have 2 attacks. So 1 square of these guys is having 6 attacks go out. So that helps their basic attack of only 10, because you will get harassment penalties on what you're attacking, stacking up pretty quickly, and you'll be able to start getting some hits. They also have 5 fire resist and 5 cold resist with full dark vision. That's really nice to have just base standard on a unit. And we'll talk some more about why the fire and the cold resistance is pretty important for these guys, I feel. Of the 2 units, I would probably go with the spear. Yes, you're paying a little bit of resource, quite a bit more since all you're getting is a spear. But the basalt weaponry and armor is quite good. So bumps his attack up by 1, so we're now above that 10 average. But now we're doing 16 magic damage. That's a pretty handy thing to have on a cheap troop. So we have full magic weapon access on this nation. We do not have to worry about how we're going to deal with ethereal or other things that need to be countered by having a magic weapon. Of the 2, I definitely do like this guy more, but there's things in this roster later on I like even better. Next up, we have the Shambler chassis. And these guys also are decent. So our regular Shambler, 2 attacks, notable for having 15 damage on them, so it's pretty good. He has very high strength. Note he jumps up to size 4, though. So if I'm going for just really cheap units to recruit, I like the other guys better, because we're going to have 6 attacks coming out of a square rather than just 4 coming out of a square. So not too much of note on this guy here. Next one up, we have Shambler of the Deep. And I think this guy is secretly the VIP of this entire roster. You've probably already noticed he has 3 attacks. So now that, even though we still only have 2 per square because we're the size 4 Shambler chassis, that square still has 6 attacks going out. The same attack distance as those smaller guys. So we're going to still have the harassment penalty. We're even stronger, so now we can do even more damage. We still have the 10 attack, relatively low defense, although we're getting a little bit higher. We have 9 natural protection. That's pretty nice. We're not having to pay resources for that. We have the full dark vision, and we still have the cold resistant and heat resistant. This is a unit that just begs for extra buffs to really kick them up. So if you give them Strength of Giants, bump that strength up, you'd be hitting so hard that you're probably going to get through even the heaviest armor of this age. You could add in the new fire buffs that up their attack and morale by 2 each. So 12 attack, 3 attacks at 16 damage or 18 damage. Very noticeable jump. Morale 13 is totally usable. Morale 15 is pretty dang good. You could add on... There's some water spells that you can do underwater that add 5 defense. So what if these guys had 12 defense on this chassis? Pretty good. What if we have good earth access? What if we started giving them stone skin or iron skin? We'd only get the +3 out of that, but still, 12 protection on these guys, nothing to sneeze at, especially having 26 HP. So these guys are really nice chassis. They come with that fire resistance and cold resistance. Because underwater is unaffected or less affected by heat or cold scales, I do feel like you probably want to scales dump one way or the other for extra points, and then use these guys, and they won't have the penalty for fighting in uncomfortable temperatures. Once we look at our mages, you'll also see we have good access to fire and water spells, which means fire damage and cold damage. So again, it's nice to have some resistance to that, especially because we're going to be throwing out some pretty big spells, maybe even battlefield-wide spells, and having that resistance just helps us negate or lower the friendly fire that we're going to take from that. Overall, very, very big VIP of this roster, I feel, and especially with only one resource. So if you wanted to dump productivity and just use these guys, I think you could do it. Next up, we have the War Shambler, who... Now, this is not the deep one variety of Shambler. So we've lost our resistances. We've also lost our bite. These guys, one situation where they do outperform their, in my opinion, generally better brethren. Notice this is a length 0 weapon. Remember we were talking about those coral barbs? A lot of things underwater have this. And War Shamblers give you a length 3 weapon. You're much less likely to kill yourself on poison than 3 attacks at length 0. It's pretty noticeable when you have to go up against Amber Clan or other people who have a lot of that coral barb ability. That also helps for repelling. A length 0 weapon means you're repelled by basically everything. And on this chassis, you have a bad defense, so you're probably getting poked. And with 9 defense, there's a pretty solid chance that things are going to negate your attack by repelling. Now, you might just be able to overwhelm them with the number of attacks. Every time you repel, you get a attack penalty, and that goes away over time. So you'll just wear them out, essentially, and they won't be able to repel everything, but it's really noticeable when you're getting repelled. Again, Amber Clan really stick out to me. In one of my test games, I bounced off a province had like 30 Amber Clan or something. I bounced off like 3 times, sending probably 20 to 30 of these guys each time. And I had to stop myself and really like, okay, what is going on? Why am I not rolling over this like I did in every other combat? And that's really what it came down to. It was a combination of getting repelled and getting poisoned off of those barbs. So having the length 3 weapon helps negate that. Another place where this really helps is on land. This guy underwater, it doesn't matter that I don't have a shield because no one's shooting at me. It doesn't matter that I don't have a helmet because no one's shooting at me. So once I get into melee, chances are they'll probably hit my body. I'll probably be okay. It is very noticeable. When you go into, let's say, a throne that has 30 archers, they will decimate these guys before they're able to hit the enemy lines. In a case like that, maybe you jump up to at least the War Shambler. They have an okay shield, 15 protection's fine against arrows. They have higher just protection in general, and part of that's just higher natural protection combined with some armor value. But it helps. It definitely helps. Still not wearing a helmet, but it's very noticeable. If that's not enough, you could do Warrior of the Deep. So this is the better chassis, and we've got our bite back. So now we have maybe the best of both worlds. So we have a shield at least, but we also have that really high damage Basalt Spear. So a length 3 magic weapon that does 21 damage, and a length 0 bite that does 19. So a very strong troop. However, 10 times the resources of a normal Shambler of the Deep. You could have 10 of those guys for the same amount of resources. So the attack density is also only going to be 4 instead of 6. So you have to really pick and choose when this guy's the appropriate one or the other guy's the appropriate one. And you'd want to probably lean on the cheap until you can't. You need to go on land, you're going to have archers, you're getting repelled just like crazy. Maybe it's time to switch over to this guy. Next up we have Coral Guard. an interesting unit, not cap only or anything like that, so you could recruit them anywhere. If you wanted to use these guys more extensively, now we're definitely not taking sloth scales, and we're probably having to move more towards production. Yeah, 23 resources, 30 gold, 39 recruitment points. You're going to be limited on these guys, even in your best castles. You're probably not going to get more than maybe 10 of these guys. I mean, that would already be 390 recruitment points. That's a lot of recruitment for the early age. They have the poison barbs, so if that's relevant to what you're fighting, that could be a pretty dang potent ability. They have 17 protection, so very strong. Of note, we finally put on a hat. Big brain boys here, put on a hat. We still have a good shield. We're using a coral glaive, so it does give us the weak poison. Can be kind of nice. It is the link 3. Nope, not particularly great attack skill. And when you fight underwater, if you have slashing on your weapon, you take a penalty. And if you have slashing piercing, you take, I believe it's 50% of that penalty. It is pretty noticeable if you try to use these guys underwater and you're expecting them to hit things and do that big 27 damage. Now, these can still be useful though. If you need a solid 17 protection unit in the front, maybe the barbs are useful. But I'd argue for this cost, 30, 23, 39, maybe Reef Dwellers could do that for you. You could basically get 3 Reef Dwellers for one of those guys and just flood them with numbers. And perhaps this would be better. We wouldn't have the penalty on our attack if we actually need to hit things back. And we just have more bodies on the field. That being said, these guys can be kind of nice. When I go for thrones, I'll often grab a few turns of recruitment of these guys, and I put them as kind of like the center of my line to just be the guys that hold the line while other people do the killing, especially our mages, once we look at them. So, very usable unit, but you have to think about them. It's not just the, I can afford it, I'm now building these guys. They also don't have those elemental resistances, which can be pretty handy. Finally, we have our sacred unit, the Living Pillar. I want to like these guys, like I want to like almost all sacreds. First glance, you look at this, you're like 21 protection, 31 HP. We've got a magic damage spear. We've got 2 attacks, so they're a lot better than, let's say, Formoria's giants, because they only have 1 attack, or or because they're not wearing a helmet, and these guys don't wear a helmet, or many of the other bigger, expensive sacreds. But these guys have a secret weakness, and it is, as usual, the helmet. So you look at this and you're like, oh, 21 protection, great. I'm going to make these guys just a solid line. I'll throw like a regen, cheap, I'll just give them regen, they'll be fine. They have 9 head protection, the same as some of your super cheap guys. And these guys cost 35, 50 resources and 35 recruitment points for a 9 protection on the head. And they will get hit in the head, and they will die, and you will be sad for that price. In addition to that, they also have another weakness, 10 encumbrance. 10 encumbrance means after 3 rounds, we're at like 27 to 30 fatigue. We're starting to take even heavier defense penalties. We're going to have people getting to just stab us after not very long. We're going to get higher and higher every single round of combat. We are going to exhaust ourselves very, very quickly. Now, because I was so impressed with the Agartha Weightless Bless, one of the first things I did was, well, obviously, we need to check if a Weightless Bless could fix these guys. And the short answer is no. It doesn't fix these guys. So, right here, we've got 9 encumbrance. Why do we have 9 encumbrance? Well, that's because we're underwater. So we get a slight little boost for these guys being underwater. These guys too. So because we're native down here, we're not quite as tired by fighting underwater. That's pretty handy. But still, 9 encumbrance is not 3 rounds. Again, you're at that high 20s, and you're going to start having problems. Okay, let's see what our Bless does. All right, so our Bless is weightless. That's the only thing I gave him because I didn't want anything else to change stats. So we have +1 morale and weightless. What are we looking like now? We're at 5 encumbrance. 5 encumbrance is much, much better than 9. So that helps quite a lot. That being said, weightless is not a super cheap, like this isn't Blood Surge. It's not super cheap. It's 5 air and a earth. We don't have a particularly good chassis to take that. In this one, I took a human like Archmage just to get it on the cheap, just to see what I could do with it. But at 5 encumbrance, you could get these guys. They could stand in front and be tanky. They're okay. The problem is weightless doesn't do anything else for the rest of our lineup. So you're basically taking a blessing to fix a problem with a, at best, acceptable, maybe, sacred, and that's only if you've taken weightless. If you don't take weightless, I don't think these guys are even usable, frankly. Because even as stand in front and just get hit, like say Agartha's Sacreds, Agartha's Sacreds do it better. They're way cheaper. They're bigger, which ironically helps them because you just take up more space with your just blob of HP. And when we look up here, the other things that we have that could take our bless are not helped basically at all by having weightless. I guess we could throw some super heavy armor on them to get some use out of it, but at that point we're just building things to take advantage of something that we took to solve a different problem. Like it's very convoluted. It's not particularly useful. So unfortunately, Living Pillars get a thumbs down from me. Cool unit, cool lore on them, not usable. All right, up top, we have a scout. He has 35 gold. He is very cheap. He is plenty stealthy. He does have dark vision and amphibian. Good guy. We have a Shambler Chief, 75 leadership. He does have the dark vision, so that's something. And he's low on resources. He's very cheap there. Other than moving troops, though, I generally do not get these guys. I generally like to bump up to the Coral Commander because he has 100 leadership. So now we can get formations. And we quite like fighting in formations. We want to get out our attack density on our better troops, and formations help us apply our attack density to a larger area. In addition to that, he comes in with good protection and a hat. So just in case you have to go above ground or above water or anything, he's equipped for that. He does have 7 encumbrance, which isn't good, but your commanders generally aren't in combat anyways. So he's just going to hang out in the back, and if something slides by, which I tend to find a lot more things flank underwater than they do above land when fighting indies. So it's not super uncommon that something sneaks by, he has to do a little bit of fighting. And if that's the case, he's got an 11 attack, plenty high damage weapon, sling 3, he can repel some stuff. He's got 25 HP and 17 protection. This is a good commander. A little more on the pricey side with the 23, but he's still only 110 gold. You could get 2 of them, or him plus another 1-point recruit guy. And if you're buying those super 1 resource troops, you'll have spare resources, so you could totally afford these guys, no problem. Next up, we have Coral Priest, and he can also be recruited in Coral Forts. So this is another thing we can get on our coastal land forts. They're not particularly great. I don't know why you would need a ton of Holy One guys. I generally do like to get 1 or 2 of them. They are my guys who go out and build both my fortresses and my temples, and might do just a smidgen of preaching. We'll talk about water and Dominion later, but it can be kind of difficult to get your Dominion going, and we'll talk about why that is in a minute. So overall, a usable unit, cheap to get out, does what he needs to do, no problems there. Next up, we have the Mother of the Deep. This is a Holy 2 priest. We're starting to get a price here. We're at 135 gold, and we take a full fort recruitment turn. I find these ones in a weird middle ground, awkward area. If I want something dirt cheap, I'm going with the Holy 1 priest. And if I want to do big things, I'm going with our Holy 3. So why do I want a Holy 2? If you're just worried about morale, Holy 2 lets you do Sermon of Courage, so that's something they can do. Yeah, I struggle with these guys. I do find that every once in a while I do end up getting one. Our Holy 3 is slow to recruit, so she needs 4 recruitment points and is cap only. So maybe you just need some more priests for some banishing or something. This would be a lot better than probably the Holy 1 at doing that. They can preach higher, so if you have a temple, they could preach up to 4 dominion, so that could be kind of useful. There's reasons that you might want one of these. Next up, we have our... Well, I'm actually going to skip our mage, and I'm going to talk about our Holy 3. So this is the Basalt Queen, cap only, slow to recruit, takes 4 points like I mentioned. Only 1 resource, pretty pricey on gold though. And we are very able to spend all of our gold on troops if we so choose. So you have to figure out when is the correct time to get one of these. Bog Standard Holy 3 has Amphibian like everyone else. She comes with Fear. She comes with some Resist and full Dark Vision. Unfortunately, she uses a club instead of a spear. Generally, the piercing's better than club, but, you know, when you club somebody for 34 magic damage, you're probably not worried what type of damage it is. She also has a bite, a little bit hungry sometimes, and so at 2 attacks, it's okay. You probably don't want a Holy 3 in melee, but it exists. Maybe you take a blessing of some sort that makes this into a light fuck? Maybe? I wouldn't do it, but I mean, she can bless herself. She has the holy spells. Of note, the Holy 3 damage spell that you end up with doesn't cause fatigue, so you can spam that for days and not have to worry about that. That's something kind of useful. Low encumbrance out of the gate, so not going to struggle with that too much. And full slots, so you could gear up however you wanted to. And it has a decent weapon, so you wouldn't have to... You might be able to get away without that. Overall, though, I get a few of these. I quite like Holy 3s. It's ironic we have such a bad Sacred, because she would be great for blessing groups of Sacreds, but probably not. But it's nice to just be able to bless everyone. Our mages are not Sacred, our cap-only mage is, so it can be useful just to have one unit that's like, hey, everyone gets Divine Blessing, I don't have to worry about that anymore. She can do Sermons of Courage if I need it. She can just blap things for the entire combat and never tire out. So overall, pretty good unit. Also of note, Holy 3 means we could preach up to 6 Dominion at one of our temples. So we can preach very high if we so choose or need to. Next up, let's check our mages. We have 2. Our Mage of the Deep, not Sacred. So right away you know that the upkeep, 240 gold a year. So that's a pretty pricey mage. He costs 300, so again, pretty pricey mage. But he is pretty good. I feel like water is a path that improved pretty greatly in Dom 6 compared to Dom 5. The splitting up of spells between like a little dinky thing and a huge thing and nothing between. We got some more ice spells and water spells, and it helps. It helps them have things to do. Water 2 means that we can water power and then spam full-sized water elementals. Water elementals are oppressive underwater. So we have a guy here that can, out of the box, easily do that. However many gems you want to give him. He can pop, I think it's probably 3 before he gets tired. He also has pretty decent random paths. So we have 2 100% chances to get fire, water, or earth. And one of those 100% chances could also give us astral. So that's why I say you have a tiny, tiny chance. You have a 25% chance each one to get some astral. If you did get astral, I would site search with him, because that's your only way you're going to be able to do that. And I don't know, if you got 3 of them, you could commune them for something. I don't know, put a little astral magic out there. You could power spears and then do something with that. Generally speaking, though, our elemental magic is pretty darn good. So you could random into a water 4. You could random into water 2, fire 2. Fire 2 would let you could fire buff yourself up to 3. You could still water buff yourself up to 3. So you'd have 3 water, 3 fire. Having at least 1 fire opens up the acid spells. Acid spells are pretty good. Well, I think towards the end here, we'll actually look at some spells, because these guys are great casters. Atlantis in general has some great magic access. So if you've been playing and you're a newer player and you want to just blap some magic, Atlantis could be a really good place to do that because every mage they get will be useful. Previously, we looked at Arcus Felli, and they have lots of random paths too, but theirs are a little harder, I feel, to get. Like, you have to really think about every mage and what they can or can't do. These guys will always be useful. You could get an Earth 2, so you could summon Earth Power up to Earth 3. These are going to be probably your guys who are going to do like Strength of Giants for your troops, or do Earth buffs for your troops. Very useful. Higher water, especially underwater, is very strong, but on land can be quite powerful too. So very decent mage here, if not maybe a little pricey. They also have Gift of Water Breathing. So if for some reason you had some land units that you wanted to bring underwater, they could do it for you. And maybe that'd be relevant. Maybe some of your forts above water are recruiting and you have an emergency and just need people underwater. They could help with that, I suppose. Half dark vision also. Of note, they have full slots and they are wearing a helmet. So they got the helmet, but then they're like, fine, I'll put the helmet on, but I'm not wearing pants or a shirt. You get one or the other. I don't know what was up with that, but I guess if I had to pick, I guess I'd pick the helmet because arrow to the head's more deadly than arrow to the body, and they do have 20 HP, so sure, I guess. And lastly, we have our Basalt King. This is a big boy. This is one of those, like, yes, this is an early era mage. 620 gold, so not cheap. Only one resource. They do take 4 recruitment and they're cap only, so you're picking between these guys or a queen. Out of the box, 1 fire, 2 water, 3 earth. So right away you can do big earth things and you can do acid stuff. In addition, you have 110% chance, so that means 1 roll of 100% fire, water, or earth, and an additional 10% to get an additional one of those. So you could end up with fire 2, you could end up with water 3, or earth 4. With earth 4, you could earth boot them. That takes you to earth 5, and you could do like riches from beneath or other earth rituals. You also can do big earth things in combat. They're also sacred, whereas our other mages were not. So I don't think these guys can quite make it into super combatant realm, but heavy thug, definitely. These are good thug paths. Quickness, all the earth buff goodness, fire shield stuff. Plus we can bless ourselves. Maybe we just take like a regen buff and 51 HP, you're going to be regening plenty. Comes with fear out of the box. Comes with fire and cold resistance, so that's pretty good. Full dark vision. They also give you a resource bonus. So if they're just sitting in forts, they can help you get some more troops. So if you're getting those really cheap troops, that's 10 extra guys for just having one of these guys present. So pretty good there. Very strong casters. Unlike a lot of casters where you have, like, let's say 3 paths, I don't feel like these guys waste very much. Once they go off script, they'll use everything, and they'll use it to effect. So they're not just going to start putting dumb buffs on things too often. If they do, it's probably going to be Earth stuff. But Earth buffs are pretty good for you, so that's not the worst thing ever. And some of our troops don't wear armor, so they won't be tempted to temper armor on them. Sometimes it's frustrating when your guys want to spam temper armor on units that don't really get too much benefit out of it, and you won't have that issue here. So overall, what does this tell us? This tells us we have good troops that run the gambit from 1 resource up to 50, so you can go anywhere you want on your production scales. Generally speaking, we need a lot of recruitment points, and if we have the recruitment points, because resources are so low for some of these units, and units that are very usable, we can spend as much money as we get and transfer that directly into troops. We have good leaders, we have budget options, we have a scout, we have a good line commander that won't just die to a random arrow. You have your flavor of priest from 1 all the way up to 3. You have a very reliable mage, if not a little expensive. I didn't touch on it, but for 240 gold a year, these guys are not good researchers for only getting 13 research. You may need to come up with a way to help that, whether that's magic scales or finding a booster that you're going to try to get. But researching all the way up to You don't start with any native air, so if you're thinking owl quills, don't count on that. So you're going to go construction 5 for something else. That's a long way to go with bad research. So just know you got to have a plan for how you're going to get your research done, and you want research because between those guys and the kings, you have very good mages. On the national overview mod, unfortunately they missed one here. We actually have one national spell, and it is Summon Monster Fish. I will put him on screen here, hopefully. It's a fine unit. It has a swallow whole attack, which is interesting. They could be quite terrifying if they're buffed. So it has uses. You could swallow other people's thugs if they're smaller than the fish, and they just die. So that could be handy. They cost water gems, which we get 2 from this site. Our other gems are 3 earth and 1 fire. So you could put some of those out pretty decently, but they're not sacred or anything, so more of a flavor spell with some use than anything else. Not useless. We have no national items that are special. This is a test game that I did take all the way to victory. I feel like it went pretty smooth. I had a pretty bad starting location here because I had Kalem's capital here. I had Kalas's capital here. And I had Helheim's capital here. One of the things I've noticed is the way Dominion jumps between land and water, it can be difficult to get your Dominion to do that. There's a different calculation for how your Dominion wants to spread. But having all these capitals on the coast means that more than likely their Dominion's going to start pouring over. This is right next to my capital, and I still have not pushed this back out. And this is after working on my Dominion. I actually had a mother here for a while, preaching myself all the way up. I did take high Dominion on this pretender. I did the same thing here and here and here and here. Like, I had to actively make sure that I was spreading out my Dominion. There's reasons that you want that beyond just the +1 morale for fighting in your own Dominion. We'll talk about that with pretender design in a second. But overall, I did leave it on all random nations, and I did roll as the only aquatic nation. Oftentimes, either in multiplayer or in single player, even if you leave it at completely random, you'll probably be the only person underwater. So you have pretty free reign of how you want to expand down here. But be careful. If you spend all of your time expanding underwater, the enemy is going to be spending all of their time expanding above water. And you might go, okay, I'm done underwater, where am I going to go above? And you look up there and it's like, oh, capital, fort, 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 fort. And they're all at like 9 Dominion because the AI loves to spam out temples. You're going to have like a D-Day landing to be able to get above water. And there's no reason. You don't have to wait for research. Turn 1, I could attack here if I chose to. There's no major penalty to doing so. So if you see areas that are strategic, like maybe take an area next to a throne and try to hold on to that just so you have the ability to get to a throne. So that's a bad example, but like this one. It's not coastal, so I couldn't just pop out of the sea and take it. I needed to get there. And if I had let Kalem take this entire coast, or Kalasa take the whole coast, they would have cut me off from this one and from this one. So I had 2 non-coastal thrones I had to take for my victory. I had an easy one. Actually, it was a pretty hard battle, but easy in the sense that nobody else was going to take this. And I had a coastal one that I could just come out of the ocean to take. But I needed a way to get here. So don't just play like you're just aquatic. Play like you're amphibious. You can go above water. Maybe grab yourself some decent income forts, like this guy right here. 20,000 population. I'm getting a good chunk of money from this fort. And it's all the way up to castle. So pretty hard to siege down. You can see here, so I have fortification is, it's called a fortress up here, above here. This one's not upgraded to the castle. But I have my lab and I have my temple. For recruits, I have the Holy One Priest and I have those coastal reef dwellers. And you can see I'm recruiting them here because I needed more bulk for throne taking. But compare that to our underwater recruitment with all these other options. Note that those reef dwellers cost 10 resources. So if you go heavy sloth, you're not going to be getting as many as maybe you'd like. Compared to, I've switched over here because I was doing land fighting, but our Shambler of the Deep guy right here, I could have 10 of these for 10 resources. So that's something to consider. Otherwise, I do think we expand perfectly fine. We have good choices for expansion. Also, if you do run across something kind of difficult, our mages are guaranteed to have water too. They can water strike if absolutely nothing else. For Evo 1 water strike, range 35 plus, so good. It's an area of effect 1 and it casts fast. Precision 2, so it hits a whole square. It's more accurate than usual. It's longer range than usual. It's faster casting than usual. 20 fatigue is somewhat high, but you could spam 6 of those really before you pass out. And the damage is pretty good, 13 plus magic damage. So if absolutely nothing else, put a line of bodies there with 3 or 4 of these guys behind it, just pop, 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 and they will take out whatever's causing you the problems. Or you could spam water elementals, another way to take out problems underwater. So you have tools, very cheap tools, to be able to expand down there. Summon water power is also only Conjuration 2. So I do think that you want Evo 1, Conj 2 very early. Probably your first 2 researches. Like, you just want to get that, because that gives you a little bit of safety that you otherwise wouldn't have. And maybe even Conjuration 3, so you could get lesser water elementals quite early. Going beyond that, though, you may want to go even higher. Probably up to 5, where you can not only summon full-size water elementals, you can use Voice of Tiamat, and it's only 2 water. So every one of our mages could cast this. This is a really nice underwater ritual because it will find you all elemental sites. So fire, water, air, and earth for 8 water gems, which you'll have plenty of probably, unless you've really been water elemental spamming. You can find every single site. So if you check here, I searched most places. If it has the one astral, that means I manually searched it with an astral mage. But everywhere else, I have a full search, all these different places, full searched, using that spell. And it's very efficient because I don't have to move. So normally it's like turn 1 move, turn 2 search, turn 3 move, turn 4 search. Instead, in 4 turns, I would have searched 4 provinces. So you can do it pretty quick. And you'll have, I think I used 3 mages, and I burned through almost all my gems in like 2 or 3 turns. And then I had one guy just finish up the last couple while the others went back to research. I also noticed in this game, I only had, where was that? I lost him. I only had 1 air site in the entire ocean. So if your plan is to do Alquils or you need air for another reason, other nations might need air magic or air gems to construct things that help them get out of the water. Be warned, you may just get unlucky and not get a site. Like I said, I had 1. I have my 1 gem here. And that's from the entire ocean, searched at Air 9. So something to consider for mainly other water nations. But just keep in mind that, you know, you don't always count on getting the gems you want. In our Formoria game, we were counting on getting Earth gems, and we basically just didn't get them, and it stunk. So just keep that in mind when you're designing pretenders or strategies, that you may not get the gems that you think you want. Another thing in here is we can get sea trolls, which can be kind of useful if you need it. I think our troops are good enough that we don't have to worry about it. Monster fish is here at 6. Bishop fish can be a really huge spell for some nations because it lets you summon a Holy 3 aquatic unit. We don't need that because we can just summon our own in. Alteration is going to be another place that is really good for us. Lots of those buffs. We can do the earth ones, we can do the water ones very easily, and we have high enough paths to do plenty of stuff. We can do extra resistances, we could do freeze, plenty of stuff here. I do want to especially call out evocation though. In evocation, we have a lot of really good spells. Cold Bolt got buffed to area of effect 1, and it made it infinitely better than it used to be. Range 50 plus, so quite far, quite fast. A small area effect, but area effect nonetheless. Quite accurate. Good spell. All of our mages could do that. If they roll in some fire, they could do Geyser. They could do Acid Spray. Tons of good stuff. Your Fire 2 could do Firebolt. They could summon Phoenix Power and do Flares. Cold Blast, so that's a pretty good area of effect spell. Acid Bolt, if we get even higher. And if you roll the fire on those guys, they could all do that. We could do Rain if we need to turn off like Abyssia's Heat Auras. We can do that pretty consistently. We will have Water 3 mages that can do that. Rain can be pretty oppressive for Abyssia. We can do Magma Bolts. We'll have guys who have that. Even higher, we can do Acid Rain. So now we're getting into the big AoE spells. Area of Effect 6+, range 30, fast cast, low precision. But for 6+, doing 12 acid damage is pretty notable. Acid damage will start damaging equipment, so you could break shields, weapons, armor, stuff like that. Very useful. This will also give Blade Wind to your kings. Blade Wind's a pretty good spell that could be useful. You could get a king who has Fire 3. You could have Falling Fires, and we will have Water 3. So our recruit anywhere underwater mage, so any of our forts with a lab underwater, has a pretty decent chance of being Water 3, and we can do Falling Frosts. This is the reason why I think on Pretenders you want to strongly consider cold spells, because you're going to have really good access to this, and it will do magic cold damage, and it will leave guys frozen from that, and it being cold helps keep that going. There's other cold spells that leave lingering auras. That helps there. If you have to fight undead stuff, we have Cleansing Water, which is really good against demons and undead. Really good. Like, yeah, this is a very nice spell. When you need it, essentially. Besides that, in enchantment, we have Fire Shields possibly for your kings. We also have Fire Ward, so if you need some higher fire resistance, it's there. Underwater, you have Friendly Currents that helps people move faster and fatigue less underwater. So an interesting battlefield buff that you can do. Grip of Winter. So this makes the entire battlefield get cold, very cold. And if you don't have cold protection, you will just die. You will freeze to death over time. And we have troops that, even though they're not sacred, come in with cold resistance. So either you buff your own cold resistance or use troops who are resistant to it. Very likely we can have Water 4s. Easy spell for us to cast, and if they're not expecting it, very good on just wiping out armies pretty easily. Anything else here? And those are pretty the big ones there. In Thaumaturgy, we have the Fire 2 or Fire 3 buffs that I was talking about. For the attack skill. +2 attack skill for 3 attacks is pretty dang noticeable. Going from 3 10 hitting attacks that hit for 16 to 18 damage to 3 attack 12s, that's pretty dang big. That's pretty dang big. And we are strong enough that we could get to this is the 20 plus size. And I don't think that one has, I think that's as big as that one gets, but still. A few of these guys to throw some of those at the beginning of combat into your troops would definitely help. Definitely help. So, lots of great buffs, lots of great evocation, direct damage, lots of great access to battlefield-wide stuff. Also, don't forget you have really good earth, so you might do destruction, you might do Curse of Stones. We have lots and lots of choices. Also, one that a lot of people don't get a lot of use out of. In Thaumaturgy, water spells have these like dehydration spells. Desiccation, Sailor's Death, Curse of the Desert. These are basically save or you start dehydrating, which translates into game turns, you fatigue. You just keep taking fatigue. And that can be really good, especially against things that are low magic resistant. Also of note, I don't know if we've researched high enough here. I don't think I have. No. Rune Smashers. At Construction 5, a Rune Smasher is 2 water, 2 fire to forge, and the person wielding it gets a bonus to making their spells harder to resist. Those big battlefield magic resist spells, you have a Sacred Mage that can cast them, so you could add that to your blessing, and you have the ability to forge that plus Void Eyes, I believe, are forgeable by us. So you can really stack on the MR penalties and help those spells that are powerful but sometimes hard to land really land, and we have the mages to easily use that. So just for a smattering last look here, these are just the kings I recruited. I don't think I lost a single one this game. So fire, water 3, earth 3, fire 2, water 2, earth 3, and with my main army, fire, water 3, earth 3. So tons of high strength mages. I'm not going to read them all here, but tons and tons. This is most of the mages I recruited all game. Just we went throne 2, 3, 4 for the victory, just straight in a row. And I rolled over those thrones. I completely rolled over them. I wish I had saved the turn before so I could have shown you the combat, but there was Acid Rain, Falling Frost, and Falling Fires just decimating troops. While my front line here was mostly these Warriors from the Depth. And I needed those because I was having issues with the amount of repels and the amount of archers the thrones had. So I went with this guy, and he served me just fine. Just fine. Buffed him up. Was very happy with their performance. So, overall, Atlantis, very cool underwater nation. They're a nation that actually survives all the way through. They have different successor nations that happen. They have a pretty sad story, but that's most of Dominions for you. A great nation for beginners if you want to start underwater. I think even for just beginner players in general, I think this would be a fine nation. You have magic casters that are not confusing to use. They have spells that they're obviously going to be good at. You have troops that are decent to good. You might be able to roll up a map where you don't have any direct competition. AI is not particularly good about getting underwater. So if you just pick some land nations, they'll generally struggle to come fight you. So you can fight on your own terms. Great nation, great nation. Let's look lastly at Pretenders. I'm only going to show one here. I'm just going to show you the one I use for this game. We have a unique or unique-ish chassis in this Dark Crystal. It's kind of like the Immobile Earth Monolith. For this game, I went with 4 air, 5 earth, and 6 astral. My thinking was he has a Nep Smith, so I wanted to have the ability to do some communion matrices if I wanted to, or boosters if I wanted to. I also wanted air not only for staves of elemental power, so I could do the air earth one if I needed that for boosting up one of my mages, which I didn't in this game. But I also took that for our bless here. I took Farcaster so that our kings could hit with those big AoE spells all the way across the battlefield. I took the magic penetration bonus, so again, make those MR resist spells even harder to resist. I took 1 reinvigoration just to help them out a little bit. I did take 1 click of shock resistance just so that if I needed it, I could pull out my sacreds and they would have 5 shock, frost, and fire resist, so they could resist a little of everything. And on my kings, just in case, a stray lightning bolt might not kill them. And I wanted some air also for precision, because I didn't mention it. Our kings only have precision 8. And if you're going to make their range even further, you're going to struggle to hit with some spells. And so that just helps a little bit. They're not going to be super accurate, but it was helpful. And I had tons of points because on this guy, for our scales, I went up to 8 Dominion, not because I needed it, but it helped with the problem of the land nations overwhelming me once I got going. It takes a while to get going, though, because you have to fill up to 8 candles before it starts spilling over. But I didn't have anything else to spend it on. I couldn't afford any other paths or anything. But pretty decent magic paths here, 4, 5, 6. And I took very good scales. I did, on this run, take 2 order and no production. I didn't take a penalty to it, but I didn't add any bonus either. I went cold, so our cold spells would be better above ground, and they were. I went full growth, full luck, and because of this chassis, you can up your magic scale. So I went up to 3 magic to help our kind of mediocre mages do some research. Overall, I quite like this guy. We have Holy Threes, so it doesn't matter. He's a mobile. He has lots of astral magic, so he could both teleport himself or cloud trapeze himself or even gate an army around if I had to. So plenty of options there. And I didn't do any big rituals, but we could do Riches from Beneath if we did end up needing more resources. So that would be an option to us. We could do Eyes of God. Lots of things there. We do have a small amount of astral guys, so we could get a little bit of pearl income. Maybe we could get one of those globals up, or we could link them into communion with him if we had to for a desperate moment. Lots of use there. So overall, I'd be really interested to know if other people have a different opinion on those sacreds. Maybe you think they are really good and I'm just missing something. I feel like Weightless, if there was going to be a secret sauce, that would be it. I don't feel, even if you put like Reinvigoration 5 on them, A, that would be more expensive, and B, I don't think it would fix their problem. I don't think Regen would fix their problem, but I'd be curious to see if anyone else came up with something that these guys could do. Maybe, I don't know, something really crazy like Vampiric or something to help with the fatigue, but yeah, those attacks are so low, and you're probably going to kill your target so it won't proc. I don't know on that one. I think it really comes down to, are you going sloth, are you going neutral, or are you going production? Are you going cold, or are you going hot? I think those are your main choices. And for chassis, I guess we should also peek at that. We don't have a ton of choices as Atlantis. It is a very limited roster for Pretenders. So we only have 2 immobiles. We have a couple Titans. We do have 1 unique guy, this Dagon guy. He's interesting because I believe he has grab and swallow. He can swallow people whole if they're smaller than him. I guess you could meme it up and go larger so he could swallow elephants. That's pretty funny. But he is super expensive. He has 300 points. My crystal was 170. Like, dirt cheap comparatively. We could go down here to 100 point Grand Hydromaster. We do have the Demi-Lich. We do have Master Lich. We do have a unique Ghost King, if you're a Ghost King enjoyer. Another reason you might go colds for him. I don't know, he's kind of cool. He's got a lot more life than normal Ghost Kings have, I believe. Normal Ghost Kings are just human chassis. You have expanders if you felt you needed that. You could go with the snake. The worm might be a better choice than the snake, though, because he comes with regen. So you could go like, I don't know, hard skin, and then we have the regen. He take a little bit more water. He could self-bless himself with quickness, maybe. Liquid body. There's things. This guy can definitely expand, especially if you up that protection a little bit. He's got lots of HP, and he comes with the regen, so. And fear. So, decent expander chassis. Probably better, I would say, than the Earth Serpent, since the Earth Serpent only has recuperation and not regen, and no native access to regen via nature magic. Otherwise, you have expensive Titans that I don't feel do that much for you. You have a dude that rides a lobster. That's cool, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, so very limited. You don't have tons of choices here. So pick your poison, I suppose. That's going to conclude it for our pregame discussion of early era Atlantis. Very cool nation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to streaming it. I think it's going to be a fun stream. Finally show off some underwater stuff to people. If you've made it this far, thank you. You are a super champion. Please leave a like down there that tells me that you enjoyed it. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. You'll see when I'm streaming. Usually at the moment, that's Friday evenings. But that could be subject to change in the future. And if you're subscribed, you'll know. And you can see the other Dominions content or other content coming out. And that's the best way you can help the channel. And I appreciate it. So I look forward to hearing what people have to say about Atlantis. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion since we haven't done a Water Nation yet. Take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you in the stream.